Okay, here's a real quick look at the process of fermentation. So during cell respiration, we have three phases: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. And when a organism is needing a lot of energy, for instance, let's say you go for a run, your body is going through all three of those phases inside of the mitochondria of most of your cells, including the muscle cells, which are probably going nuts with tons of mitochondria producing a ton of ATP. And that's the energy then that's able to move your muscles and allow you to move. Now, if you start pushing the limits of what your body can actually produce, which is to say that your body is producing ATP as fast as it can, as fast as you can take in oxygen to keep accepting those electrons and keeping the process going, you're producing ATP. If you keep pushing beyond that, though, then your electron transport chain is going to slowly get backed up, because it's not going to have enough oxygen in order to keep accepting those electrons and keep producing that ATP. Now, when the ETC starts shutting down, then the Krebs cycle is going to start shutting down, and then, as you might expect, the glycolysis process would shut down too, and suddenly you have no ATP. Thankfully, the process of fermentation steps in, and what happens there is that as your body starts breaking down that glucose and producing the pyruvate that's going to go on to the Krebs cycle, if the body begins to accumulate too much pyruvate because it can't get accepted by the Krebs cycle because there's not enough oxygen to keep the whole process going, instead what can happen is this secondary reaction, which is all about converting that pyruvate into something else, which in this case is lactate, and that's going to become lactic acid. But the whole point of that is about taking NADH, which is our energy-carrying molecule from glycolysis, and turning it back into NAD+ so that it can go back to glycolysis. This is super wasteful, because basically what we're doing is we're taking this energy-carrying molecule that we spent a lot of energy and time making during glycolysis, and we're just undoing it. But the point is that it allows glycolysis to keep happening even if the Krebs cycle and the ETC have completely shut down. Now, the reason why that's helpful is because even though glycolysis is kind of the least efficient part of the whole cell respiration process, it still manages to produce 2 ATP. And if you're in the middle of a run or any physical activity where your body needs energy in order to survive, you'll take that 2 ATP. It's not the same as the 34 to 38 ATP that you could get from the whole process, but in a pinch, it's pretty good. And so when you start pushing yourself super hard and you're exercising or running or whatever, and you feel like that burn in your muscles, what you're actually feeling is the process of fermentation, because the byproduct of all of this is this lactate here at the end. And lactate is going to become lactic acid in the muscles of a person, and that's going to cause that sort of burning sensation because you're actually feeling the accumulation of this acidic molecule inside of your muscles. But what that means is you're really pushing yourself about as hard as you can go, that your body's taking in as much oxygen as possible and filling in the gaps of the needed extra energy by undergoing fermentation. Probably not good for like super long, durations, but it's a pretty good indicator of when you've found what your limit is in terms of physical activity. So the process of fermentation is all about sort of keeping things going, keeping things limping along as long as possible in the absence of oxygen. Obviously, as we all know, you go too long without oxygen, you hold your breath, or whatever, that's going to get pretty bad pretty quickly. So fermentation can't replace respiration, but it can at least sort of provide a little bit of an extra bump. So there you go. That's fermentation. Hope that's helpful.